Hello, this is a very special day in my Barossa kitchen because it is our family comfort food. It's what I love to cook more than I think anything else. And I want to share my tips with you that can make a difference. But I am lucky to have the legacy of really well brought up chooks, and there are well brought up chooks through every state of Australia. So if you can, search them out. Now they cost more, but they go a lot further. But if you can only get your supermarket chook, which is quite likely, I know that these tips that I use for my birds are just as important, perhaps even more important. So let's start. There's quite a difference with a fresh or frozen bird. And the frozen bird, a good chook can freeze, there is no doubt about it, but it's really, really important to make sure you get all the moisture that accumulates after a bird is frozen. But even on a fresh bird, which this is, there will be moisture when it has been bagged, which is what happens in the processing. So let me show you. Paper towel works a treat. Not only am I going to dry the bird, I'm going to dry inside the bird. And if this should be frozen, it is even more important really to get inside the bird there and make sure there are no juices. So there's just moistness because it's a fresh bird, but really making sure that you've got all those juices. And the little tricks. First of all, your bird must be at room temperature, and that might take 1 hour or 2 hours, depends entirely on whether your weather is cold or whether it's temperate. Tucking the wings behind the bird, such a small thing, but it's really important. You know, the tiny things are important. And the reason I tuck them right behind is to make sure that lovely part of the breast doesn't get impeded by the wing baking like that. Just tiny things. Now, I happen to have the very last of the tarragon in my garden. In a couple of weeks' time, the tarragon will have gone to sleep for the winter, and perhaps 4 or 6 weeks' time, I might be lucky. Tarragon and chook is just one of the most special things, but harder to find. This is a French tarragon. It's very fine, but it doesn't have to be tarragon. It can be thyme, it could be rosemary chopped up, but the more flavour, if you're working with a supermarket chook, the more flavour you can put into it, the better. But because our family has this love affair with chook and tarragon and butter and olive oil and verjuice, that's what you're getting, all in one. So I just strip the tarragon and I'm going to mix it with some softened butter and put it under the skin. Now, this is definitely an optional, but if you can do it, do it. I can't imagine a household without butter and some herbs. I hope you've got, if not a garden, you've got a little pot on your veranda or a friend, because fresh herbs make such a difference to cooking. Okay, now, how do I do it? I'm just separating, there's a sort of a sinew here, and it's all about getting your fingers, this is fingers only, whoops, it's always harder when there's a phone pointing at me. Here, see how I've pulled that sinew away with my fingers and I'm exposing the breast without the skin. Oh, now, which leads me to, if ever you're buying chicken pieces, like thighs or breasts, please get it with skin on. Skin is what keeps it so moist. even if you're strong enough to cook it with the skin and throw it away, the skin that is. See how my hand is right under there? And this is part of being a cook, you know. It's a hands-on thing. So here is a couple of tablespoons of softened butter, just softened enough to be malleable. I did leave that in the oven too long, just to soften it from the fridge. I haven't bothered to chop the herbs. It's the flavor I want, not the exactness. So straight under the skin like that. And then I use my other hand to smooth it over to cover the breast. And of course the butter there, also, you know, one of the issues with cooking a whole chook is how you do it so the breast doesn't dry out and the legs are cooked. Now I don't do the chefy thing, I'm a home cook. A chef will tie the legs together, and I have never ever done this. And I'll tell you why as we go on. It's just one of the tips to be sure that it is cooked. Now, I'm going to use the same bowl. Now I've got butter. I tend to use olive oil and salt, quite a bit of salt. You'd be surprised. Chook really needs salt, and I'm rubbing that over. Cooks are I am a very tactile cook, and I'm a very hands-on, and using my fingers feels good. Okay, the oven must be preheated, of course, and that's to 200 degrees. Now this is a big chook. It's actually 2.17 kilos. So this will serve easily 6 adults because it is such a beautiful chook. One of the things about preheating the oven is also making sure that your oven shelf is in the right position, because you don't want to lose the temperature while you put your chook in the oven by having the oven door open and fiddling with the shelf. Again, such a simple thing. Now the other is protecting the breast. The breast is, as I said, the part of the bird that will dry out. Now this is about putting some foil just over the breast and tucking it in like that. And we're going to actually cook for about between 30 to 40 minutes, depending on your oven. Let's go halfway, 35 minutes on a baking tray that doesn't have high sides. Now I keep coming back to that. When you're putting something in the oven and you want it to be cooked as evenly as possible, the shallower sides of a baking tray are the best possible. And so the heat will go straight onto the bird. So we're going to put that away. This is ready to go into the oven. What I didn't do, I'm going to put salt in the cavity as well, because, as I said, you'd be surprised, salt really does enhance a chook tremendously. Okay, 200 degrees. Now, another little secret that some of you might be able to use, but it's not essential. I happen to have an oven, it's a Miele, that I can do bursts of steam. If you have an oven like that, then put the water in and burst of steam at 15, 30 and 45 minutes. It really is like an insurance policy, but I've only had that for about 2 years, and I've cooked more chooks in my life than sliced bread. Whoops. Okay, 35 minutes, and all I'm going to do at that 35 minutes is take the foil off and give the breast a chance to catch up with the golden colour of the skin. And then I'll cook a little bit more and I'll tell you the next bit of magic. Just to make it easier to see, that's 40 minutes in. I went the whole 40. I'll now take the foil off, but this is where I need a touch more olive oil. Of course, you can use a brush, and about 1/3 of a cup of verjuice, and a little more salt, and it goes back in for, I've turned it down to 180 degrees. I actually turned that down at 30 minutes into the cooking. Now I'm back in the oven because now I want the breast to become golden. So let me say 30, 40. I'm going to put on another 25 minutes and then I'm going to check it. Okay. Right. Now, I need to tell you about things that I do without thinking. But before I do that, I want to say this is one of the things you really need in your kitchen armory, and that is a digital thermometer. So a digital thermometer, to be sure this is cooked, and because it's a 2.17 bird, it may not be. But to be sure it's cooked, we need it to go to a minimum, it is, okay, all right. It is telling me it is cooked. In fact, it's already 66 degrees. I like taking it out at 64 to go to 66. So I'm talking about what I think, oops, sorry, I should show you that. I'm talking about, to me, what's absolute perfection. This will still be, I would rather have it 2 degrees less, but anyhow, to rest it, I always turn it over. And even though I've used a good splash of verjuice, I would splash it again for the resting. But the things that I did instinctively without having told you about is I am at about 50 minutes into the cooking, and so far it is cooked for 1 hour and 5 minutes, right? 50 minutes into the cooking, what I did was just open the oven and I basted the bird, and I saw that the verjuice was making it burn a little. See it burning this end, just a little. So I put about 1/4 cup of water in to save it from burning. So all these little things that I just do instinctively. And the other way, if you don't have a thermometer, and I really hope you can tell if a bird, this bird needs to rest before you would ever, at least 25 minutes before you would ever tackle it. But I can tell because the legs are showing me. See how they're showing that it's coming away from there. Once it has rested 25 minutes, I'll show you another trick with the legs that tell us whether it's cooked or not. But the thermometer absolutely is your sense of security, because you don't want it under 66 degrees, 65, 66, because that's when the possibility of nastiness, like salmonella. It's not likely to happen, but you don't want to. Now, to turn it upside down, and it's not as burnished on the bottom, I know, but that doesn't matter. because you're not going to eat much of that. You've got that beautiful burnished skin, and by turning it upside down, all those juices will go into keeping the breast as moist as we possibly can, and that's our target. Perfectly cooked, moist breast, perfect chook. Wait till I carve later. The chook, it's actually been an hour out of the oven because I've got distracted doing other things, picking some herbs from the garden. I want to show you how that makes it even more perfect for the carving, but it is still warm. It is really warm. It's more than room temperature. It is the most perfect temperature to cook. It is the most perfect temperature to actually eat at because you're getting the full flavour. But if you're concerned, these are all the juices that have come from the bottom of the tray. Now, as I took the tray aside to let it rest, I also made sure I sort of got I didn't have my bare hands at the time, all the juices from inside as well. And these are all those juices. You can put those on to warm up if someone in your family feels they have to have the chook super, super hot, which I don't. Okay, the other, where did I put it? Oops. The other thing that I have is that I would never, ever serve warm food, that's cold now, the plate, warm food on a cold plate. So I've warmed that in the oven. So here goes how to carve a chook to put it on the family table that everyone can make the most of. I said before, if you don't have a thermometer, the best way of telling that it is cooked is pulling this aside and you can see that it's cooked through. It's still shimmery, but it is not pink, right? So that is perfection. Now I do this little trick, and you have to remember I've cooked so many chooks and so many pheasants. Even though I'm just a self-taught cook, I know my way around a bird. And so I tend to take that off in one piece, right? I find it easier to handle. I like to use a combination, you make sure you have a sharp knife, but I like to use a combination of knife and fingers. See how I just pull that away? I haven't used a knife at all. And that is that beautiful piece that sits in the back there. I'm going to do this first. Then the little eyelet there, just pull this out. And of course you can use your knife, but that comes out as beautifully as that. But because this is a 2.17 kilo chook, there is no way the leg, this texture, this denseness of the meat means it's incredibly rich. And it is also quite luxurious in terms of the purse as well. So here, put this aside for the moment. I've taken the drumstick, perhaps I have to do that slower. Put the knife through there, and then you just pull it back, and it just comes off so easily. Now the other thing I do is I separate the thigh into two because it is so incredibly rich, but I don't bother to take that bone out. So let me just put them there for the moment. There. And here. Whoops. Then we tackle taking the breast off the frame. Now, you don't have to do it this way. It's quite easy if you have a pair of secateurs and some grunt. You can just force it down and carve it on the bone. Serve it on the bone. But I like to take it off the breast by making this bold incision that is close to the, see how close I've got to the breastplate? So I'm not wasting any meat. And then I follow it down. Now, if I was a fancy chef, I'd have taken that wishbone out, but I haven't. And that leaves a beautiful, tasty bit for somebody. So here, I just, once again, I'm using a combination of the knife and those are blood vessels. They are not underdone. That shiny, beautiful breast meat is just what you want for a perfectly cooked chook. Then I'll carve it into 3 and see, silky, but you can see how moist it is. It's really, really moist. Now that goes on there. The second bit. Now, of course, if you had secateurs and wanted to just cut into it, then it's equally good. It's just that I'm used to doing it this way. If you tried to do this before it cooled down, can you see the heat that is still, I'm not sure, is there steam coming, Chris?
Yes.
There is some steam. And that is an hour out of the oven because this is a big bird. It was loosely covered with foil, but that was more for making sure there weren't any farm flies flying around. So, not too bad. I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay. That there. Now this bit here, this is where a well-trained chef would have taken the wishbone out. But can you see how this makes the most beautiful titbit? Whoops. And it also gives a frame that as soon as Colin sees it, he'll gnaw into that. So, okay, to serve. The plate is warm. The breast, it's just a case of putting all these, see the silkiness, the moistness of these pieces of meat. So, so beautiful. Whoops, where do we put this? And this, nothing is wasted. And then if you are concerned that someone in your family wants it a bit hotter, or you're taking a while to get to the table, I've warmed the juices up, and these are just the juices from the cooking. I've not bothered to take the fat off. I've got some, I can't help myself, no, am I? Yes, I'm going to. See how green just makes that plate come alive? I'll leave it for people to put their own salt on it. And this is my prize. This never gets to the table. The perfect chook.